In a silent mansion, the night is torn by a scream and the sound of a body crashing down the stairs. A pregnant woman, bloodied on the cold marble, becomes part of a cruel charade staged by her own husband. But an overlooked detail, a reflection, a mark, a stray phrase, begins to unravel the constructed lie. Now, even in silence, she prepares her revenge. And the world will hear her truth. The mansion in Belgravia, London, remained silent that Thursday night. Marina Cavendish adjusted her blue silk dress as she descended the Italian marble staircase, carrying a tray with the dinner she had prepared. 6 months of pregnancy made every movement more cautious, but she had learned to do everything with perfection in the house where she had lived for 3 years. The scent of rosemary and red wine drifted up from the kitchen, mingling with the aroma of white lilies that decorated the entrance hall. Robert Thorne was in the library, as he was every night. Marina could hear the clink of ice in his whiskey glass, the third since he had arrived from the office. A real estate magnate, Robert commanded an empire of luxury, constructions that spread across the city. His name was in business magazines, his photo alongside politicians and celebrities. To the outside world, he was a successful man. To Marina, he was a shadow that grew darker every day. She entered the library, balancing the tray. Robert didn't even look up from his laptop. Marina placed the plate on the side table, noting that the empty bottles next to the armchair had increased since the morning. She took a deep breath before speaking. "We need to talk about tomorrow's appointment. The doctor said it's important for you to come along this time." Robert took a long sip of whiskey before answering. His voice was slurred, laden with irritation. "I have a meeting with Japanese investors tomorrow. I can't cancel it for an ultrasound." Marina felt the familiar tightness in her chest. It wasn't just a routine checkup. The obstetrician had noticed something in the last tests and asked for both of them to be present. She tried to keep her voice calm. "It's not just an ultrasound, Robert. You know Dr. Henry specifically asked for you to be there. It's about the baby, it's about our daughter." He finally looked at her, and Marina saw that dangerous glint in his eyes. She knew that look well. It was the harbinger of a storm. "Our daughter? Are you absolutely sure she's mine?" The words cut like a blade. Marina felt tears burn, but she didn't let them fall. Not in front of him, not anymore. "How can you say that? How can you even think such a thing?" Robert rose violently from the armchair, knocking over the glass, which shattered on the wooden floor. Marina instinctively took a step back. "I can think whatever I want. This is my house, bought with my money. You were nothing when I met you, working in that miserable art gallery, pretending to be someone important." His words grew louder, more aggressive. Marina protectively held her belly, feeling her daughter stir inside her, as if she could sense the danger outside. "I never pretended to be anything. You asked me to marry you, Robert. You said you loved me." "Love?" He laughed bitterly. "You know very well why I married you. I needed a presentable wife to close deals, someone beautiful enough for magazine photos, and you needed someone to pull you out of that mediocre life." Marina felt something break inside her. It wasn't the first time he had said cruel things, but this time there was a different coldness, a naked truth he had never admitted so clearly. "If that's what you think, why don't you let me leave?" The question slipped out before she could think. The silence that followed was more frightening than the shouts. Robert walked towards her slowly, so close that Marina could smell the strong alcohol on his breath. "Because you're not going anywhere. You are my wife. You will remain my wife. And you will have this baby. And smile for the cameras and do exactly as I say." Marina tried to pull away, but he gripped her wrist tightly. The pain was immediate and intense. "You're hurting me. I'm teaching you your place." She tried to break free, but Robert squeezed harder. Marina pushed his chest with her free hand, desperate to create distance. That's when he shoved her back, harder than she expected. Marina felt her balance slip, her feet sliding on the polished marble. She tried to grab the handrail, but her fingers only grazed the cold surface before her body began to fall. The world blurred into pain and panic. Each marble step was a new explosion of agony. Marina tried to shield her belly with her arms, but the impact was inevitable. When she finally stopped rolling at the bottom of the stairs, she couldn't move. The pain was so intense it stole the air from her lungs. She tried to scream, to call for help, but only a faint whimper escaped. She could feel something warm seeping from beneath her, staining her blue dress. Her vision began to darken at the edges. Before consciousness completely fled, she saw Robert at the top of the stairs, standing, watching. He didn't come down to help her. He just stood there, motionless like a cold marble statue. Then, slowly, he took his phone from his pocket. Marina heard fragments of the call before everything went dark. "Hello? I need an ambulance urgently. My wife fell down the stairs. It was a terrible accident. Please, come quickly." His voice was calm, controlled, perfect. It was the voice he used in business meetings, the voice of a man in complete control of the situation. As darkness engulfed her, Marina felt one last thing before losing consciousness completely. The clear and terrifying sensation that she had just seen the true face of the man she had married, and that somehow he had turned her nightmare into a convincing lie in a matter of seconds. The distant sound of an ambulance siren was the last thing she registered before everything faded away entirely. St. Thomas's Hospital was steeped in the typical silence of the early hours when Marina was admitted to the emergency room. Robert Thorne accompanied the stretcher with the face of someone who had just seen their world collapse, but Dr. Alistair Finch, on duty for 15 years, had seen that kind of performance before. Something about the way the husband behaved didn't match the urgency of the situation. He was too controlled, too calculated. Marina underwent emergency surgery that lasted 4 hours. The doctors managed to stabilize her, but the news was not good. The baby had not survived the trauma. The medical team cautiously informed Robert, expecting the typical reaction of a father who had just lost a child. He lowered his head, covered his face with his hands, and his shoulders trembled. But when he lifted his face, Dr. Alistair noticed there were no real tears, only the performance of them. Over the next 2 weeks, Marina remained in an induced coma while her body recovered from internal injuries. Robert appeared every day, always impeccable in his grey suit, always with fresh flowers. The nurses commented on how dedicated he was, how he held his wife's hand and whispered words of love. But Dr. Alistair observed, and the more he observed, the more suspicious he became. It was during a routine examination that he noticed. Marina had marks on her wrists, contusions in different stages of healing. 2 ribs had been fractured weeks before. The fall, already in the process of recovery. There was also an old bruise on her upper arm, in the unmistakable shape of fingers. That was not the result of the fall. It was the result of something much worse. Alistair discreetly photographed the marks and requested a more detailed assessment from the hospital's forensic team. When the results arrived, they confirmed his suspicions. Marina Cavendish had been assaulted for months, perhaps years. The old rib fractures, the bruises in strategic places where clothes could hide them, all pointed to a clear pattern. The doctor faced a dilemma. Legally, he should report it to the authorities. But something told him that Robert Thorne was no ordinary man. His company had powerful connections. His name was on building plaques all over London. Such a man could easily manipulate any investigation. Alistair needed someone with enough power to confront him. That's when he remembered. In the emergency records, Marina had listed her father as a contact in case her spouse was unavailable. Augustus Cavendish, a retired judge. Alistair knew that name. Augustus had been one of the most respected magistrates at the Royal Courts of Justice, London, known for his unwavering integrity, and for never having yielded to political or financial pressures. On a Tuesday afternoon, Alistair called the listed number. The voice that answered was deep, tired, but firm. "Hello? Dr. Augustus Cavendish? This is Dr. Alistair Finch from St. Thomas's Hospital. I need to speak with you about your daughter Marina. It's urgent and delicate." There was a pause. Augustus had tried to visit his daughter in the hospital, but Robert always found excuses to prevent the meetings. He said doctors recommended few visits, that Marina needed absolute quiet. Augustus suspected something was wrong, but he had no proof. Now, a call from a doctor changed everything. "What happened to my daughter, doctor?" Alistair chose his words carefully. "We prefer to talk in person. Can you come to the hospital tomorrow? Say at 3 in the afternoon. Ask for the 3rd floor meeting room. come alone. The next day, Augustus Cavendish entered the hospital with a heavy heart. At 68, he still maintained the upright posture and piercing gaze that intimidated defense lawyers in courtrooms. His white hair was impeccably combed, his navy suit well fitted. He might have been retired, but he carried with him decades of experience in recognizing lies and uncovering hidden truths. Alistair received him in a discreet room and closed the door. Without preamble, he showed photographs of the marks on Marina's body and presented the medical report. Augustus held the documents with hands that began to tremble, not from weakness but from a contained rage he hadn't felt in years. That scoundrel was hurting my daughter. It wasn't a question. It was a realization he should have made sooner. Augustus remembered details that now made sense. Marina always wearing long-sleeve blouses even in the London heat, her excuses for not visiting him, the way she avoided talking about her marriage. He had been a judge for 40 years and hadn't been able to see what was happening right under his nose. "There's more, Dr. Cavendish. The fall was no accident. I'm certain of it, but Marina is in a coma and cannot confirm. And this man, Robert Thorne, is putting on a show for the press. Yesterday he gave an interview talking about how fragile life is, how devastated he is. It's all a very well-rehearsed lie." Augustus closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. When he opened them again, they held the steely determination. That had made him one of London's most feared and respected judges. "Will my daughter wake up?" "Her vital signs are improving." "I believe so. Perhaps in the next few days." "Then we have to protect her. If he did this once, he'll do it again. Especially if she wakes up and decides to tell the truth," Alistair agreed. "I've thought about that. When she wakes up, we can officially keep her in a coma for a few more days. That would give us time to gather evidence, to protect her before he knows she can testify against him." Augustus began to think like the judge he had always been. "I'll hire a private investigator, someone who can find out everything about this man without raising suspicion. I need to know if there are other victims, if there are witnesses, if there's anything we can use. And there's one more thing," Augustus added, as if remembering something important. "That name, Robert Thorne. I've judged him before." Alistair raised his eyebrows. "How so?" "Years ago, when I was still active. It was a corporate case, an accusation of public tender fraud. He managed to escape due to lack of sufficient evidence, but I never believed in his innocence. At the time I thought about investigating further, but I was transferred to a different court. Now I understand he hasn't changed. He just got better at hiding who he really is." The two men exchanged a look of understanding. They were embarking on a battle against someone powerful, someone accustomed to manipulating systems and people. But both had dedicated their lives to defending those who could not defend themselves, and Marina needed them now more than ever. "I'll need your help, Dr. Alistair, to keep my daughter safe in here while I work out there. You can count on me. I will personally supervise her treatment, and I will handpick the team that will have access to her room, people I trust completely." Augustus shook the doctor's hand with gratitude. For the first time in weeks, since he had learned of the tragedy, he felt there was hope. It wouldn't be easy, it wouldn't be quick, but he would see justice done. For his daughter, for the granddaughter he would never know, for all the women Robert Thorne might still hurt if he wasn't stopped. Brooke Meadows parked her red Honda motorbike in front of the cafe on Carnaby Street and took off her helmet, shaking her short brown hair. At 35, she had the look of someone who had seen a lot on the streets of London. A private investigator for a decade, Brooke had built her reputation solving cases that the police considered impossible or low priority. Augustus knew her from an old case, when she still worked as an independent forensic expert. The retired judge was already seated at a back table when she entered. Brooke immediately noticed the weight on his shoulders, the tension in his jaw. She knew that look. It was the look of a desperate father. "Dr. Cavendish, I got your message. By the tone of urgency, I imagine it's serious." Augustus pushed a thick folder across the table. Inside were copies of medical reports, photographs of the marks on Marina, and a preliminary dossier on Robert Thorne that he had begun to compile himself. "It's about my daughter, and about the man who almost lost her forever." Brooke spent the next 40 minutes listening to Augustus describe the entire situation. She made quick notes in a small notebook, her expression growing more serious as the story unfolded. This Robert Thorne is no ordinary man. He has money, power, connections. It's going to be complicated. That's why I need you. I need concrete evidence, witnesses, anything we can use to ensure he pays for what he did. And I need you to be discreet. If he finds out we're investigating, he might try to do something worse. Brooke closed her notebook and looked directly into Augustus's eyes. I'll take the case. But you need to understand one thing. Investigating powerful people is dangerous. They have resources to create obstacles, to intimidate, to make witnesses disappear. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared for whatever it takes to protect my daughter. Brooke started immediately. Her first stop was the mansion in Belgravia. She couldn't enter, but she could observe. She spent 3 days studying the house's routine, identifying the staff, recording schedules. She noticed there was a cleaning team that always arrived on Tuesdays and Thursdays, a cook who came in the morning and left in the late afternoon, and a private security guard who stayed in the gatehouse at night. The following Thursday, Brooke followed the cleaning team when they left work. There were 3, women, all in uniform, all with tired expressions. She watched them get on a bus together on Oxford Street and decided to follow. 2 got off at the subway station, but 1 continued into South London. Brooke got off behind her. The woman was short, in her early 40s, with black hair pulled back in a tight bun. When she entered a bakery, Brooke followed her in. "Excuse me, may I speak with you for a minute?" The woman turned, startled. Her eyes were dark and suspicious. "What do you want with me?" "My name is Brooke Meadows. I'm a private investigator. I'm working on a case related to the mansion where you work, Robert Thorne's house." The mention of the name made the woman step back. "I don't know anything. I just do my job and leave." "I know you're scared, but it's about his wife, Marina. She's in the hospital. I need to know what you saw in that house." "I didn't see anything." Her voice trembled as she said it. Brooke realized she was lying, but also that she was terrified. She decided to change tactics. "Look, I understand you're afraid of losing your job or worse, but Marina is fighting for her life, and the man who did this to her is pretending to be a victim. If you know something, anything, it could make the difference between justice and impunity." The woman looked around nervously. She clutched her purse strap so tightly that her knuckles turned white. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Is there somewhere we can talk, away from here?" An hour later, they were sitting on a park bench in Notting Hill. The woman finally introduced herself as Joanna Smith. She had worked at the mansion for 2 years and had seen things that haunted her. "I heard them fight, always. He would shout a lot, especially when he drank. She never shouted back, just cried softly. Sometimes I'd find broken glasses, pictures on the floor. Once I found blood in the ensuite bathroom. Not much, but it was there. She said she'd cut herself shaving, but I didn't believe her." Brooke wrote everything down. "And on the night of the fall?" "I wasn't there that night. But the next day, when we came back to clean, everything was different. The security system had been turned off. Dr. Thorne said there had been a technical problem, that he was going to call someone to fix it, but I saw that he himself had disconnected the cables." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. I saw the cables ripped out, not carefully disconnected, as if someone had pulled them in a hurry." This information was gold. Brooke needed to find the technician responsible for installing the security system. If there was any backup, any record that Robert didn't know existed, they would have concrete proof. Joanna hesitated before continuing. "There's one more thing. He offered me money 3 days after the fall. He said if anyone asked me anything about that night, I should say the house was normal, that I never saw anything strange. He gave me £5,000 in cash." "You accepted?" Joanna lowered her head in shame. "I did. I need the money. I have 2 small children, but I can't sleep at night. Every time I close my eyes, I see that woman's face. She was always kind to me, always treated me with respect, and I accepted money to protect the man who hurt her." Tears streamed down Joanna's face now. Brooke gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You can fix this now. You can help Marina get justice, but you'll need to testify officially when the time comes." Joanna wiped her tears and nodded. "I'll do it. Even if I lose my job, even if he tries to scare me, I'll do the right thing." Brooke spent the next few days tracking down the security technician. She discovered he worked for a company called Secure Tech, specializing in surveillance systems for high-end residences. His name was Charles Mason, a 30-year-old man who had worked for the company since he was 20. When Brooke finally met him at a cafe near Secure Tech's headquarters, Charles was cautious but cooperative. He remembered the installation at Robert Thorne's house perfectly. Top-of-the-line system, cameras in all main rooms, continuous recording with automatic cloud backup. The client paid extra for the backup service because he wanted a guarantee that he would never lose any recordings. Brooke felt a thrill of anticipation. "So there's still a copy of the recordings from that night?" "There should be. The backup is automatic, saved on external servers. Even if someone destroys the physical system in the house, the recordings remain in the cloud for up to 90 days before being overwritten." "How long ago was the fall?" Charles checked his phone. 16 days. "Then there's still time. Can you access those recordings?" "Legally? No, I'd need a court order, but I can confirm if they exist and provide the technical data needed for a judge to authorize access." Brooke immediately called Augustus and relayed the information. The old judge felt a wave of hope. He knew prosecutors, he knew active judges who respected his work. Getting a court order would be possible, but it had to be done carefully. Robert couldn't find out until it was too late. Meanwhile, at the hospital, something was changing. Marina had begun to show signs that she was about to awaken. Dr. Alistair intensified his vigil, making sure Robert was never alone with her. A nurse named Patricia Ramsey, who worked the night shift, was assigned as the primary caregiver for Marina. Patricia had her own demons. Years ago, she herself had escaped a violent relationship that had almost cost her life. When Alistair discreetly explained Marina's real situation, Patricia didn't hesitate to help. She knew what it was like to live in fear, what it was like to need someone to believe in you when no one else did. It was on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after the fall, that Marina opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was the white hospital ceiling, the soft lights blinking on the monitors around her. She tried to move and felt pain in every muscle of her body. Her throat was dry, her head heavy. It took a few seconds to remember where she was and why. The memory came like a punch. The stairs, the fall, Robert at the top, watching. And then, with a devastating pang, in her heart, she remembered the baby. Her hand instinctively went to her belly and found only emptiness. Marina felt a scream forming in her throat, but she couldn't make a sound. That's when she realized she wasn't alone. A nurse with brown hair and kind eyes was sitting in a chair beside the bed, reading a book in the dim light of a lamp. Noticing Marina's movement, she immediately stood up. "Marina, can you hear me?" Marina tried to speak, but only a hoarse whisper came out. "My daughter." Patricia gently held her hand. "I know you're confused and scared, but first you need to rest to recover. I'll call the doctor." "No, please, first I need to know, is my daughter alive?" The nurse hesitated. She had been instructed by Dr. Alistair on how to handle this moment. The truth would be painful, but necessary. "I'm so sorry, Marina, the trauma was too great. The doctors did everything they could, but she didn't make it." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Marina closed her eyes, and tears began to stream down the sides of her face, wetting the pillow. Patricia said nothing, just held her hand and let her cry. She knew that pain well. It was the pain of something ripped from you that could never be recovered. After a few minutes, Marina opened her eyes again. Her voice was firmer now, imbued with a determination that surprised even herself. "He pushed me. It wasn't an accident. Robert pushed me down the stairs." Patricia leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I know. And your father knows. And there's a doctor here, Dr. Alistair, who also knows. We all believe you, Marina, but you need to listen carefully to what I'm going to say now," she explained. The plan. Robert couldn't know Marina had woken up, not yet. They needed time to gather all the evidence to ensure that when she finally accused her husband, there would be enough evidence that he couldn't escape. Marina would have to pretend she was still in a coma whenever Robert visited. He comes here, every day, brings flowers, holds your hand, cries to the nurses. It's a well-rehearsed play. Marina felt nauseous. The idea of Robert touching her while she was unconscious, feigning concern, was revolting. But she understood the need for the disguise. If he knew she was awake and lucid, he might try something desperate. How much time do we have? Your father is working with an investigator. They're close to getting something important. Maybe another week, 2 at most. Marina nodded. A week felt like an eternity, but if it was what was needed to secure justice, she would endure it. In the following days, Augustus visited his daughter always at times when he was sure Robert wouldn't be there. The reunion was emotional and silent. Father and daughter hugged for long minutes, both crying, both trying to find strength in each other. Augustus told her everything, about Brooke's investigation, about Joanna and Charles, about the recordings that still existed in cloud backup. Marina listened with growing attention. When he finished, she had information to add. There are more things you need to know. Robert is involved in illegal business. I overheard his phone conversations. I saw documents he hid in his office. Tender fraud, bribes disguised as consultancies, contracts with shell companies. Everything recorded, everything filed. He has an entire system of corruption, and he made me a part of it. Augustus wrote down every detail. The investigation was expanding beyond the assault. If they could also prove the corporate crimes, Robert would have no way to use his connections to get away with it. It would be too big, with too many loose ends. Meanwhile, Robert was beginning to show cracks in his perfect mask. The pressure of maintaining appearances was taking its toll. He drank more, slept less, and his temper became increasingly unstable at the office. It was on a Tuesday afternoon that he gave an interview for a major national program on British television. The studio was packed, cameras focused on him as the presenter, known for her emotional interviews, asked questions, laden with sympathy. "Robert, how have you been coping with this tragedy?" He sighed dramatically, rubbing his eyes as if holding back tears. "Every day is a struggle. Seeing Marina in that hospital bed, knowing our baby is gone. It's a nightmare I can't wake up from." "Were you home when it happened?" "I was in the library working. I heard the terrible sound of the fall. When I arrived and saw her lying there, all that blood, I thought I had lost her right then and there." The presenter held his hand sympathetically. The studio lights shone, cameras captured. Every expression, every studied gesture. Robert was in complete control of the narrative. "Marina is everything to me. When she wakes up, I will spend the rest of my life taking care of her, making up for everything." The interview continued for another 20 minutes. Robert spoke of love, of family, of tragedies that bring people together. When it ended, there was applause from the audience. The presenter hugged him. Social media exploded with messages of support. But something happened that Robert didn't foresee. When he stood up to leave, he forgot that his lapel microphone was still on. And as he walked backstage, talking to his lawyer who was waiting for him, his words were picked up and broadcast live. "Do you think I convinced them?" "Perfectly. No one will question anything now." "Good, because if that stubborn woman hadn't crossed me, none of this would have happened. But now she's exactly where I want her, dependent on me, without the strength to defy me." The studio fell silent. The director tried to cut the broadcast, but it was too late. Millions of people had heard. Social media, which moments ago had overflowed with support, now erupted with indignation. In the control room, someone recorded the full audio before it could be deleted. In less than 10 minutes, the video was circulating everywhere on the internet. The title, "Businessman Robert Thorne Shows True Face on Open Mic." Robert realized his mistake when his lawyer paled looking at his phone. He violently ripped off the lapel microphone and swore. But the damage was done. The mask he had so carefully constructed lay in pieces on the floor. Augustus watched the video for the first time on his phone, sitting in the hospital waiting room. He felt a mixture of satisfaction and anger. The accidental confession was not enough for a conviction, but it would completely destroy Robert's public image. And without his reputation, without public support, he would be much more vulnerable. Brooke called minutes later. "Did you see the video?" "I did. This changes everything." "I'll speed up the investigation. With public opinion against him, it will be easier to get witnesses, easier to push for access to the recordings." "Do that. And Brooke, thank you. For everything." "It's not over yet, Dr. Cavendish. But we're close. Very close." That night, Robert did not go to the hospital. For the first time in 3 weeks, he did not appear for his daily visit. He was locked up at home watching his empire of lies crumble in real time. His company began receiving calls from investors wanting to break contracts. Partners requested urgent meetings. The press camped outside the mansion, and Marina, still pretending to be in a coma when necessary, felt something she had forgotten for years: hope. The court order arrived 3 days after the microphone incident. Augustus had used all the contacts he had accumulated in 40 years on the bench to get a high court judge to authorize access to the recordings. Charles Mason, the secure tech technician, was called to extract the files from the cloud backup in the presence of a court official and Brooke Meadows. It was almost 10 o'clock on a Thursday night when they finally managed to access the system. Charles typed codes, navigated complex menus, and after 40 minutes of technical work, found what they were looking for: the video file from the night of the fall. "It's here, but I need to warn you. The staircase camera was disconnected before the incident. Robert must have turned it off intentionally." Brooke felt her stomach clench. "So we don't have an image of the fall?" "Not from the main staircase, but there's something interesting. The library camera kept working until he ripped out the entire system, and the library has a glass wall that reflects the staircase. It's distant, the image will be difficult, but it might have captured something." Charles opened the file. The first scenes showed Robert in the library, drinking, working on his laptop. Then Marina appeared in the doorway. They began to argue. There was no audio, but the gestures were eloquent. The tension was visible even without sound. Then the scene that would change everything. Marina tries to leave the library. Robert follows her. The camera only catches his back as he exits the frame, but on the glass wall in the background, there is a distorted but recognizable reflection. The two figures on the stairs, Robert raising his arm, Marina being pushed. The reflection lasted only 3 seconds, but it was unmistakable. The court official officially recorded everything. Brooke felt a chill. They had done it. After weeks of investigation, they had visual proof. "I'll take this personally to the Crown Prosecution Service tomorrow morning," the official said. Augustus received the news an hour later. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to smile, but he knew the battle was far from over. Visual evidence was important, but they needed more. They needed a case so solid that no expensive lawyer could dismantle it. It was Patricia, the nurse, who brought the next piece of the puzzle. The next morning, while caring for Marina, she casually mentioned a conversation she had overheard in the staff room. "One of your husband's company secretaries, she was admitted here last night. Severe anxiety attack. I heard her talking to the hospital psychologist, saying she couldn't keep the secret anymore, that guilt was killing her." Marina sat up in bed, ignoring the pain. "What's her name?" "Camilla. Camilla Fletcher. She's been an executive secretary for 5 years. Marina knew Camilla. They had spoken a few times when Marina still visited Robert's office. A young, competent woman, always seeming to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. "I need to talk to her." "Marina, you can't leave here. We're still keeping your awakening a secret." "Then bring her here. Please, Patricia. This could be the missing piece." Patricia hesitated, but she saw the determination in Marina's eyes. She spoke with Dr. Alistair, who agreed to facilitate a discreet meeting. That afternoon, Camilla was brought in a wheelchair to Marina's room. When she saw her boss awake, she turned pale. "Mrs. Cavendish, they said you were still in a coma." Marina gestured for Patricia to leave and give them privacy. When they were alone, she went straight to the point. "I know you know something, Camilla. something that's consuming you from within, and I know you're afraid to speak, but I need you to trust me now." Camilla began to cry. The words poured out in a torrent, as if she had been holding them in for a long time and finally found someone who could listen. "He made me falsify documents, not just once, dozens of times over the years. Fraudulent tenders, bribes disguised as consultancies, contracts with shell companies. Everything recorded, everything filed. He has an entire system of corruption, and he made me part of it." Marina held Camilla's trembling hand. "Do you have proof?" "I have copies of everything. I made secret backups because I was afraid that one day he would blame me for everything and I would have nothing to defend myself with. They're on a USB drive hidden in my house. You'll need to hand those copies over to the authorities. I know, but I'm scared. He has powerful lawyers, he has money to destroy me, and I have a sick mother who depends on my salary." Marina squeezed her hand harder. "I understand your fear. God knows I do. But if we don't speak now, he will continue to hurt people. He will find other women to control, other employees to manipulate. Doing the right thing is never easy, Camilla. But it's the only thing that allows us to look in the mirror without shame." The two women cried together for a few minutes. When Camilla left the room, she had a determination in her eyes that wasn't there when she entered. She knew what she needed to do. 2 days later, Brooke received a brown envelope in a post office box she kept for sensitive cases. Inside was Camilla's USB drive and a letter explaining everything. The investigator immediately took the material to Augustus, who in turn handed it over to the Crown Prosecution Service. The Crown Prosecutor assigned to the case was Lucy Miller, a 40-year-old woman known for her tenacity, but also for her excessive caution. When Augustus and Brooke sat in her office to present the complete dossier, she listened to everything with a skeptical expression. "Dr. Cavendish, with all due respect to your career, this case is extremely delicate. Robert Thorne has the best lawyers in the country. The video is important, but he will argue it was an accident, that he merely tried to hold his wife, and she lost her balance, and as for the corporate crimes, that opens up a huge range of investigations that will take years." "So you're saying you won't prosecute?" Augustus couldn't hide the indignation in his voice. "I'm saying I need more to guarantee a conviction. I need the victim's own testimony, and she will need to be willing to face a public trial, to have every detail of her life exposed, to be questioned by lawyers who will try to paint her as unstable, a liar, or opportunistic." Brooke leaned forward. "Marina is willing to testify. She wants justice, not revenge. And with the video, with the open mic audio, with Joanna's testimony about the bribe, with Camilla's documents about corruption, with the medical reports of the old assaults, we have a solid case." Lucy studied the documents spread across her desk. It was a lot of material, very well documented, but the pressure would be immense. Robert had already hired a law firm famous for destroying witnesses in cross-examination. "I want to speak with Marina personally before deciding." A discreet meeting was arranged at the hospital. Lucy arrived on a Monday morning, dressed casually to avoid attracting attention. When she entered Marina's room, she found a visibly distraught woman, but with firm eyes. The two talked for over 2 hours. Lucy brutally explained what Marina would face: the public trial, accusations of lying, the exposure of every intimate detail of her marriage. She needed to be sure Marina was prepared. Marina listened in silence. When Lucy finished, she responded with a calm but determined voice. "Crown Prosecutor Miller, I spent 3 years of my life in fear. Fear of speaking, fear of acting, fear of asking for help. That fear almost cost me my life, and cost the life of my daughter. I will not let fear win again. I will testify. I will tell everything he did. And if that helps a single woman find the courage to leave a similar situation, it will have been worth every second of suffering." Lucy saw something in Marina's eyes that she rarely saw in victims. It wasn't just courage, it was conviction. This woman wasn't just seeking justice for herself, she was trying to create a larger change. The formal complaint against Robert Thorne was filed on a rainy July morning. The Crown Prosecution Service accused him of aggravated assault resulting in fetal loss, falsification of evidence, witness bribery, and based on Camilla's documents, an extensive List of corporate crimes including tender fraud and active corruption. It was a massive case that mobilized all national media. When the news leaked that Marina had been awake for weeks and had pretended to be in a coma to protect herself from her husband, public outrage reached historic levels. Social media exploded. Feminist movements organized vigils in front of the courthouse. The hashtag #CharkJusticeForMarina went viral worldwide. Robert was taken into pre-trial detention. Images of him being led away in handcuffs to a police car were broadcast on news channels for days. His company lost billions in contracts, partners, abandoned ship, and shareholders filed lawsuits for mismanagement. The empire he had built crumbled brick by brick. For Marina, however, the sentence was just the beginning. She had won in court, but now she needed to win the internal battle. The physical scars were healing, but the emotional ones were deeper. Augustus helped his daughter move to a discreet apartment in Notting Hill, far from the Belgravia mansion that was now being auctioned off to pay debts. The first few months were difficult. Marina woke up in the middle of the night with nightmares, had panic attacks upon hearing heavy footsteps. She began intensive therapy 3 times a week, with a psychologist specializing in trauma. Slowly, session after session, she began to rebuild herself. It was on an April morning, 6 months after the trial, that Marina woke up with a clear idea in her head. She was having coffee on the balcony when the thought came like a ray of sunshine breaking through clouds. She needed to turn her pain into purpose. She called Augustus. "Father, I need your help with something important." They met that afternoon. Marina presented her plan to create a foundation dedicated to helping women, survivors of domestic violence. A place that offered not only temporary shelter, but legal, psychological, and professional support. A place that helped women rebuild their lives completely. Augustus listened with growing pride. "It's a beautiful idea, Marina, and an important one, but it will demand a lot from you. I know, but I have to do this. I can't let everything I went through be in vain. If my story can help a single woman find the courage to leave, to report, to rebuild her life, then every tear will have been worth it." With the help of Augustus and specialized lawyers, the Renewed Hope Foundation was officially registered 3 months later. Marina used part of the money she received in the divorce to rent a large house in Kensington, which was transformed into a reception center. She hired psychologists, social workers, and lawyers, specializing in family law. News of the foundation spread quickly. Women began seeking help. Some came just for information, others needed urgent shelter. Marina was present whenever possible, talking, listening, offering not only institutional support, but also the testimony of someone who had been through the fire and survived. Patricia, the nurse who had cared for Marina at the hospital, resigned and came to work at the foundation as health coordinator. Joanna, the housekeeper who had testified against Robert, was hired as an administrator. Camilla, after serving her light sentence for her participation in the corporate crimes, joined the team as an administrative consultant, dedicating herself to helping women who, like her, had been manipulated in toxic work environments. A year after the foundation opened, Marina was in her office reviewing reports when her secretary announced an unexpected visit. It was a letter that had arrived by mail. The sender, Robert Thorne, HMP Belmarsh. Marina stood, still for long minutes holding the envelope. Part of her wanted to tear it up without reading, but another part, the part that had fought so hard for truth and justice, needed to know what he had to say. She opened the letter slowly. The handwriting was the same she had seen on birthday cards and love notes at the beginning of their relationship, but the words were different. "Marina, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that every day when I close my eyes, I see your face on the stairs. I see the fear, I see the pain, and for the first time in my life I understand the monstrosity of what I did. Prison is not my punishment. Living with this conscience is my punishment. You built something beautiful with your pain. I destroyed everything I touched. That is the difference between us. You chose the light. I chose the darkness. I hope you find peace." There were no apologies, no justifications, only recognition. Marina folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. She didn't destroy it, but she didn't reread it either. It was a closed chapter, a final word from a book she had finished writing. 2 weeks later, the foundation organized its first public fundraising event. Marina was invited to speak. She walked onto the stage in a simple white dress before an audience of 300 people. When she began to speak, her voice was firm. "Good evening, everyone. My name is Marina Cavendish, and I am a survivor. For 3 years, I lived a nightmare that began as a fairy tale. But today I am not here to talk about him. I am here to talk about you. About every woman in this room who has ever felt fear in her own home. About every person who has ever wondered if they deserve to be loved without pain. The answer is yes. We all deserve it." She told her story without graphic details, but with raw truth. She spoke of the fear, of the silence, of how she almost believed there was no way out. And then she spoke of the network of people who saved her, the attentive doctor, the determined father, the courageous investigator, the women who risked everything to tell the truth. No one saves themselves alone. I didn't save myself alone, and that is why this foundation exists. So that no woman has to face fear alone. So that there is always a hand extended, an open door, a voice that says, "I believe in you." The hall erupted in applause. When the lights came on, there were lines of people wanting to talk, wanting to help, wanting to make donations. But there were also crying women, women who saw in Marina a mirror of their own pains and, more importantly, a map to escape them. That night, when everyone had left, Marina remained alone in the reception center. She walked through the corridors where women now slept peacefully, protected and cared for. She entered her office and opened the diary she had started keeping during her recovery. On the last blank page, she wrote slowly, each word heavy with meaning. "Sometimes justice is not punishment. It is peace, the peace of being able to breathe again, the peace of waking up without fear, the peace of knowing that your story does not end where fear tried to end it, but begins where courage decides to restart." She closed the diary and looked out the window. London stretched out, illuminated under the night sky. Somewhere out there, other women were living their own nightmares. But now there was a place to run to. There were people ready to believe, to protect, to help. Marina smiled for the first time in years without a heavy heart. It wasn't an end. It was a beginning, the true beginning. Dear listeners, we hope Marina's story has deeply touched your hearts. Stories like this remind us that courage can be born from the deepest pain, and that justice, when finally achieved, brings not only punishment, but the peace of being able to start anew. If this narrative has awakened something in you, we have a special playlist full of other stories that explore the strength of the human spirit. Find it by clicking here on the side. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. This helps us continue bringing stories that matter, that move and transform. Every day we share unique narratives about courage, overcoming adversity, and justice. We await your comments. We want to know what you thought of Marina's and her family's journey. Until the next story.